Hello, I'm Adele Stern, welcoming you to this episode of the San Luis Obispo League of Women Voters Education Fund series, Slow Democracy, brought to you through the courtesy of Charter Communications. The League of Women Voters has been a politically oriented organization in the United States since its inception in 1920. We've been your neighbors here in San Luis Obispo since 1960 and have welcomed men as members since 1972. The focus of these programs will be issues of interest to the local community and to the voter. We hope to bring you some educational programs, but when we bring you controversial programs, we will let the speakers of the issues speak for themselves. If we can't have the proponents and opponents here, we will explain why. Since this is an encouragement to the voter to be informed, we hope you look for us on your dial and check the time of our programs. But for now, I'd like you to join us for today's guests. We are having a different format today. The next three programs are part of a panel discussion that the League of Women Voters had at the school board meeting room of the San Luis Coastal Board at the San Luis High School. We are moderated by Boyd Horn, and the program is covering water sources, water availability, and water quality in San Luis Obispo County. This meeting was open to the public and will be broken into three segments for your viewing pleasure. Please join us.
Let me start the next segment of this, and of course the panelists, and we will come back to questions. I want to allow a lot of time at the end because we're generating a lot of excitement here, and I realize.
Boyd, could I
Yes,
tag
go
a
ahead.
short tale? Susan showed you a very pretty map down there. Let me show you another one. Can you grab that in? So you can't see it very well, covering primarily the same area. And this is a part of a water requirements for the Central California coastal area. Date, 1967. Part of my frustration on the political side is that we're always reinventing the wheel. Why isn't it possible to pull out a report and build on new knowledge without starting a completely different approach? The knowledge, it seems to me, that we all need to make intelligent decisions, both as citizens in saying whether you like or don't like a project, or a developer, whether the development can move ahead because of resources being available, or the political decision makers based upon citizen input, but good, solid resource data, is that we don't yet seem to have a system where we have a base and we're building on it as somebody goes in the field and learns a little bit more about a reservoir. We don't have a base document, and I find that very frustrating.
Let me, I think it would be useful at this point to kind of abandon the specific questions. They were abandoned a long time ago, so I'm acknowledging. But I would like to, representing the uninformed public, which means I can say anything. What I hear is, in terms of where we go from here, the challenge to achieving an effective water development program are four that I have identified. One, technical information is insufficient. We've heard that again and again. Two, emphasis on property rights prevents information access. Three, emphasis on local control prevents cooperation. And four, a lack of complete information by the public for making and accepting decisions. That's what I've distilled out of the comments to date. But what I'd like to do now is just give each of the panelists an opportunity to express what is uppermost on their minds, if they haven't already, and then provide time to answer the questions that remain. And I'll start with Ken, and we'll just go down the list, or down the table.
Well, I think there are some members in this room who heard me make set on panels on water way back into antiquity. What I find so very difficult is we are obligated under state law, whether we be the county or the city, local government, to make general plans. And those general plans have got to contain certain elements. And we go through that process to do that. And we come up with strategies that are expressed in a general plan that talk about what our population goals are, what our circulation, what our resource bases are. And we do that. And it is a changing target. It is always a changing target. So in the case of San Luis Obispo, we have a target for X number of population growth, or population. That's a build-out figure for which our general plan is designed. Now, to accommodate that growth, we need more water than we presently have. So we're looking at options. We talked a little bit a moment ago about the reuse of our tertiary treated water to help meet that. We've talked about lightly about our retrofitting program. A development can't come in. The Duval Ranch project was mentioned a moment ago. That developer is going to have to go out and find that many toilets to take out, in order to move from high flow to low flow in existing buildings or residents throughout our city, in order to help develop a share of water. The city of San Luis Obispo could not survive another 7-year drought without some supplemental water. So we are, if you will, almost in a desperate situation, even though our reservoirs are primarily full at this time, to get another source of water. We turned down the state water. Now, we did that by a vote of the people. We didn't do that like other areas of the county where the governing body just simply said, no, we don't want it. They didn't go to the people to ask if they would like it or not, because the State Water Project was designed to cover all but the northern coastal areas of our county. There were all kinds of arguments. Some may really have been valuable, but I find it kind of strange. City of San Luis Obispo said no, the city of Morro Bay said yes. And so they built a pipeline out to Morro Bay, and Morro Bay enjoys state water. It's expensive, certainly, but there is state water out there, and the same thing exists for some of the other communities in the south. So, two alternatives. The voters in our community seem to express that we should take local water first. And the local water resource that was mentioned over and over again was the Nasiamento project. And the Nasiamento project, of course, as I told you here, was supposed to be feeding water in 1970. We're hung up because the communities to the north of us are not yet ready to commit to that kind of water. And yet, I think, and Shirley can correct me by a wink of the eye, yes or no, having spent umpteen years working with the Ag and Open Space update as a member of the County Planning Commission, there's a little zinger in that document. It says all groundwater shall be reserved for agricultural purposes. Still there, Shirley? Still there. Which means the implications are that if you're in the city, you shouldn't sink another well to take care of your population growth. That water goes to agriculture. What each of our cities should do as they expand is find a surface water resource to take care of their needs. Now, some cities, Arroyo Grande happens to be in very, very good shape. They have an interesting history. But you take other cities like Pismo Beach, Rover City, Avila, I think now tacked on to the State Water Project. They're a little different. So one of the other alternatives that we have been looking at, very, very serious, to the tune of about $800,000 worth of looking at, is raising the Salinas Reservoir Dam to capture additional water. We wish that the North County communities would commit to Nasiamento so we didn't have to spend that money, and they're spending several $100,000 to fight us. It just seems so lucrative to do that. Now, the other aspect of it is that even if we were to convince the North County people that the Salinas Reservoir raising is not going to hurt them, still won't provide the quantity of water that we need for the full general plan build-out. So we're in a dilemma.
It's a interesting thing that the issue that came out in the Ag and Open Space on just cited by Ken was one of the few things that the RAC, the Water Advisory Committee, got through to the Board of Supervisors on. I think that one of the primary difficulties in dealing with the problems in water today, whether it's here or in the state of California or where, is that it is a monstrous, interconnected, and tenuously interconnected problem that deals with just about everything that we as humans deal with. And one of the things I'd like to, if the league is going to have a committee that looks at these issues, I'd like to have them use these 3 articles here based on Garrett Hardin's The Tragedy of the Commons paper that he wrote for American Association of Advancement of Science many years ago. And one of the things in his latest publication in Science was extensions on the tragedy of the commons. And one of the boxes here says, individualism is cherished because it produces freedom, but the gift is conditional. The more the population exceeds the carrying capacity of the environment, the more freedoms must be given up. And this is what we're talking about here. There's got to be give and take. Somebody is going to consider what they are giving as giving it up. And this is something that society has to correct.
I think by the way of summary comments, I have to say that one of my frustrations from working in the water resource planning industry for 18, 19 years now is laying on the table right here in front of me. And it's all these reports. Report that all carry a central theme. They all carry the same basic recommendations. And yet I sit here and have to face a group of people like you and say, well, and you look at me and say, all right, Christine, well, why didn't it get built in 1972 or 1980 or 1995? It's a tremendously complex process in this climate to bring forward a major public works project to solve a known problem that we all share here. Tremendously complex. And I really have to compliment you here today for coming to get the basic background about water. You have kicked it up a notch now. The next time you see a water issue come before you, you've got a foundation here of what the major issues are that we're facing. But I have to tell you, after 14 years of practicing in this county alone, going to these meetings over and over and over on individual projects and starting from scratch and taking it all over was wearing on me. And it is wearing. And it is a real frustration that we, as the people you look to bring your water to, you face, and saying, what can we do for you, the public, to better understand the situation that we face and what the alternatives are? So Susan made mention of the upcoming phase of the master water plan. It's really, if you think about it, we're thinking outside the box, and we're saying, all right, we're going to come to you and say, this is what we know about your water at this point. Here's what we see as being viable options to solve that. Give us your input now so we have a better foundation to move forward from. And I look hopefully to that process as to being one that really, we get some water out of it in the end.
I think we've all heard the expression, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. And unfortunately, in our state's history, we've done a whole lot of fighting and not much peacemaking. And I think there's one other water organization that hasn't even been mentioned at all. It's called the North County Water Resources Forum. And it's a group that actually Harry Ovitt put together about 3-4 years ago. And it was an offshoot from the North County cities wanting to look more in depth into issues, and it sort of kind of gelled, and it's got representatives from all of the major interests in the North County. And not a lot really concrete has come out of this group that's been meeting monthly for 4 years. But what was really interesting was at the water rights hearings last month, with the city of San Luis pitted against the North County, and incredibly inflammatory, tough issues, and a tremendous amount of emotional involvement in the hearings. They could sit together in the hallways and talk as friends, even though they were pitted by their employments or their personal interests on opposite sides of a very difficult issue. And the friendship and the mutual respect that has come out of those meetings is tremendously rewarding to see. As Christine said, it's very frustrating to go to these meetings and keep talking to the same audience, but that group outgrew its initial meeting room. There were like 10 of us that met monthly. We now have 30 to 40 people showing up every single month, and we are learning, we are proceeding and going forward. That group, through collaborative effort, wrote a scope of work for the Paso Robles groundwater basin study. From a bureaucrat's perspective, that's work I didn't have to do. It was done and requested by this public group, presented to me and said, please, can you help make this happen? We have 2 supervisors who attend. The supervisors and the staff of the engineering department got it put in the budget. It went through the budget process. We have the funds for that study. It came from a public request. Please, we need this information. Please, will you do this for us? And we are helping to make it happen. The timeline on that is it should be getting started early next year, and it will be a multi-year study, but we are starting to work on generating the information to fill that data gap. The bottom line message I want to leave with all of you is water's important, and we have to start thinking more, not globally, but watershed-wise. We need to think of it as a valuable resource that we and our neighbors have to share. And in the back, one last little plug, there is a flyer that our Groundwater Guardian group and Atascadero put together about the Salinas River, but it also talks about watershed issues and what you can do as a private citizen to help do your part. Beyond participation in public issues, you can do it privately also, and you're welcome to pick up a copy of the flyer.
I sit in kind of an interesting chair a lot of times, being an agricultural person, farmer, and also on the city council in Rio Grande. From the council side of it, we hear that we don't want to expand our boundaries, we want to keep the open space, and et cetera, et cetera. From the agricultural portion of things, we hear the situation that we need water, the aquifers need to be maintained so that we have a reasonably priced source of water so that the farm fields can stay as they are today. I think Ken related to this a little while ago when he said during the drought, San Luis Obispo went and bought the Delidio family's production from their well to get by. That can happen again and probably will happen again unless there's some other supplemental sources of water that are brought into the area or developed. We can have the same thing happen in our area if we run out of water. So in order for the farm community to survive, we have to have a cheap or reasonable price source of water, and we do not have the resources to transport it, so to speak, as the cities do or as the communities do, because unfortunately farmers are like cities. They don't get along very well together, and if somebody's got more water than the other guy, well, then there becomes a little argument. But I would certainly like to leave that with you, that we need to expand our horizon on imported water or conservation of water so that we can keep the agriculture community alive.
Thank you, Tom, and thank all the panelists. What I'd like to do now is allow 2 or 3 questions. I'd like to make a close of the program, and then I have a hunch the panelists would be willing to stay around to answer individual questions as well. But there may be 2 or 3 questions of general interest, and so I'll take those now. And I see we have one right now, right up front.
I have a question of foreseeable future of desalination. On the North Coast area, desalination is one of the few options we have in the case of drought or water shortage. My question is, what do you see as experts in the next 3, 5, or 8 years in the technological and scientific advancement of desalination and, a consequence, lower costs? In other words, should we build a desalination plant now at today's technology and high costs, or wait a few years for lower costs?
Why, thank you. You know, one of the biggest cost components of desalination is not desalting the water. That's a little piece of the process. One of the biggest costs is disposing of the saline water once you've accomplished that step. So I think there's almost an inflated opinion of how much cost of a desalination project the desalination process consists of. So what I'm getting at is, even if there were this great, glorious technological advance in the next 3 years, you might be talking of an overall reduction of maybe 15% of the overall cost of a desalination project. Does that help? There's many processes that have been laid out for desalination, but it still does not divorce you from that disposal of the saline waters once you've accomplished your treatment.
Any more general questions?
One of the things that concerns me about desalination is the energy input. In other words, the cost of energy is not going to decrease with time. Right now we have quote unquote adequate fossil fuel in terms of what probably 55% of our oil comes from the Middle East. But you're commencing to see the Middle East, the oil producers, OPEC is commencing to get their act together, and they're commencing to be able to say, probably on the basis of the projections on the available oil supply, new reserves, etc. in the world, that this thing is coming to the end. And here you're setting up a long-term solution to a water supply problem on a potentially increasing cost of the power that goes into the process. And that's just my opinion.
So Middle East oil runs desal plants, is that basically, all right. Yes, question in the front here. Wait for the...
Why has nobody mentioned more about Nasiamento? Nasiamento, rather. I mean, it must be cheaper than building a whole new dam.
I think you're giving it back to the person who wants to respond.
I think we have been. Nasiamento is the project for which we have 17,500 acre feet of entitlement, less a small amount that is supposed to stay in the Nasiamento Dam area for Heritage Ranch and some of the other developments. Was it 15,500? 1,300 that can be exported. And it too was designed to serve a significant portion of the county. In fact, back in the early 70s, I think around 73, maybe 74, a project was put together for distributing the Nasiamento waters. And Paso Robles voters approved it, Tascadero, right on down, and over to Morro Bay and Baywood Los Osos. The way that that project was set up, as I remember it, the voters in each contractual area had to vote for it, and the total vote had to show for it. It was shot down by Los Osos Baywood, who did not vote for it. So at that time, there was a positive voter approval of the idea of tapping into Nasiamento and distributing it. San Luis Obispo did not vote for that at that time because we believed that the state water project should be the first project to serve the county. Otherwise, we'd lose the opportunity of having 25,000 acre feet. And sure enough, Santa Barbara triggered the state water, the coastal project, and we weren't ready for it.
Thank you. I'd like to close at this time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I have this distinct feeling we've only just begun. But I'd like to close at this time, and then we can respond to any questions as a group or individually. Let me just pass on this information to you. There's something called the Water Foundation, a state-level organization that provides a lot of basic information about water, and examples of the brochures are in the rear, and the access to them in terms of address, telephone number, and website are indicated back there as well. In addition, I suggest to you that as far as local county information, that Susan Littoral, to my right, would be a good person to get in contact with. Not that she is in a position to answer all the questions, but she knows the people that have the information, and she knows the sources, the documents available for that. Her telephone number is 781-5269, and I expect the phone to ring off the hook coming next week. This information, by the way, for the TV audience will be, I understand, will be on the screen so that you can have access to that information as well. In closing, I want to say that I greatly appreciate the help of the panelists, and especially Susan Littoral, to help me put this together. And I'm very proud of their performance, and I think they deserve a hand at this point. Thank you very much.